Hello, I'm Mike Bain from Christian Voice New Zealand. As a journalist with considerable experience, I simply don't understand what's considered to be acceptable standards for news reporting in this country. Now, the main job of the media is to share news and information, helping people stay informed about what's happening globally, whether it's political updates or crime reports. The media covers all sorts of news to ensure that you and I know what's going on in the world and also around our country. I know I've decried about what the current providers are passing by us as news, but for once I have to say TVNZ's Q&A program presented a balanced segment. Now, when I say balanced, the host, Jack Tame, said very little, and let his guests speak about the topic of the state of the country's economy. Now, his guest was economist Dr. Ganesh Nana. He spoke at length about the amount of interest that we're paying on borrowings and how little we were earning as a country. You know, it was the most enlightening 10 minutes of commentary that you could ever ask for. But the bottom line was that Dr. Ganesh Nana was reflecting what the New Zealand coalition government has been trying to tell us since coming into power, and that is New Zealand cannot afford to borrow any more because, as we all know, when you borrow it, it's got to be paid back. And if you have a credit card, you'll understand, it's easier said than done. No one, especially the government's opposition, appears to have received the memo, as it's daily criticising the current government as it reduces its outgoings, its expenditure, as they attempt to be good stewards of our economy. Now, I'm not going to get into the issue of whether their methods are right or wrong, but if the government is telling you there is no money in the reserves, then there is no money to spend. And they're being fiscally prudent by not borrowing or printing more. So back to the media and the big story of the day. Well, it was all about money. Not about the things that we discussed, but about how much Prime Minister Christopher Luxon made after selling his Wellington apartment when he moved into Premier House. Remember, this is the same Prime Minister who the media launched a scathing attack on because he owned 7 properties at the time. Remember, this was the same media who was critical when he refused to live there as it wasn't up to standard. And despite the money spent on it, Luxon admits he's still got to wear a warm jersey to keep warm. And just to add how infantile our media is, I picked up on this story in the spin-off. The senior reporter tagged every movement of the Prime Minister during the wearable arts and pondered as to what his thoughts were on his decision, for example, to reduce the funding for the arts. Now, these are just a taste of some of the comments made about Christopher Luxon as reported, and you get the idea how childish the senior writer can be. Yeah, that's the media for you. Hey, look, you can see why so much of the country is missing the memo about the economy and the reasons why the government wants to get the economy moving again. Why it's talking about every dollar spent should be accounted for and show results. Yeah, 35,000 people marched in the streets of Dunedin because the government refuses to pay for a project which started at $1.2 billion and now will cost $3 billion because of a blowout in building costs. Now, rightly, the people of Dunners should be aggrieved. But why won't the media explain why this has happened? Why is a hospital bill approved by the previous national government back in 2017, and why, 6 years later, the foundations are just being put in place now? I find it quite unnerving that people don't understand basic economics. That is, you can't spend what you don't have. And if you want it, you have to do something about earning it. The government cannot give you other people's money forever. It's true, we can have an attitude of that self-entitlement as much as we want, but someone has to pay for it. We as a country need to understand the biblical principle of Proverbs 22:7. The rich rule over the poor and the borrower is a slave to the lender. Now, Dr. Ganesh Nana not only spoke about government debt, but about our own personal debt as we're forced to pay for things like overpriced houses in the real estate market, overpriced food in the supermarket, and while families are going without the basics, we produce more than enough. He was talking about that balance between producing more versus producing quality. And if you didn't watch Q&A, would you have heard anything that he had to say? Well, the answer to that is simple no, but I guarantee everyone knows that Christopher Luxon, just like everyone else in the real estate market, made a capital gain on his apartment. Despite the media attempting to shame him for a good personal investment, no, they failed. And I loved his answer.
If we're going to criticise people for being successful, and let's be clear, I'm wealthy, I'm sorted.
Now, because we live in a small country at the bottom of the world, and we have a tendency to be myopic, we fail to see the big picture. And if we're going to rely on our media, who are more interested in the gotcha moment, we won't ever understand what we're going through is the same as other countries around the globe. While the US dollar remains the reserve currency of the world can be divided into three main currency blocks though, with the Americas dealing mostly in dollars, Europe dealing in euros, and the Asian countries becoming more connected to the yen. But all of them are in some form of trouble. The US has feverishly printed money to the stage that they can no longer afford the paper. Japan's borrowings have soared in recent years as the economy finds itself under immense pressure. And the powerhouse of Europe's economy, Germany, is showing weakness as it falters. Have you heard about these stories on our 6 o'clock news? Doubt it. As we cast our eyes over the world's issues, the world's culture, through the lens of the Bible, we cannot see any hope. It's only despair for our world as we chase unattainable goals like fixing the climate, like self-determination, like good leadership. Money cannot buy these things. Now, this is where I say there is good news, but you won't hear it from the media because they fail to understand and accept truth. And the only form of truth which is in written form these days is found in God's Word, the Bible. But I want to add, there will be a time coming soon when there will be peace and prosperity for all. You'll see the media trip all over themselves to extol the virtues of this new order and things controlled by a new one world government which is being formed and is about to take place. Now, people like me, you know them, the God botherers of the world, have been warning that the end is coming. It's a bit like a tidal wave. The warnings are there. But all you see is calm sea. But when it comes, and it will, there will be no escaping it. So heed the warning today from the economist, Dr. Ganesh Nana, is telling us something that nobody wants to hear, but it's there as we look towards the collapse of economies and the chain effect that will have on the world as we know it. Now, when that occurs, expect the infantile media to potentially lead the day's news with a story about Taylor Swift buying a gold-studded flea collar for a cat. I kid you not.